Good morning and good evening to those joining from Korea and Japan. I know it's around 10 p.m. there. Welcome to GW Institute for Korean Studies, or GWIKS. I'm Yeon-ho Kim, the Associate Director of GWIKS. And thank you for joining our Korea Policy Forum on cyber shadows, understanding and countering North Korea's illicit digital operations. And today's forum is co-sponsored with the GW East Asia National Resource Center and the Institute for Peace and Unification Studies at Seoul National University in South Korea. With that, let me turn it over to Celeste Arrington, the director of GWIKS, and Bum-soo Kim, the director of the Institute for Peace and Unification Studies, for opening remarks. Celeste?
Good morning and good evening. My name is Celeste Arrington. I'm a professor of political science and international affairs at George Washington University, as well as director of GWIKS, as Yono just mentioned. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this event this morning. This is the first Korea Policy Forum of the semester. And so it's a great topic, important topic for kicking off the new semester here. I want to especially thank Yono Kim for being the brains behind this operation, as well as our GWIKS staff, Ravina and Takara, for organizing the logistics of today. And most importantly, I'd like to thank our continued partnership with Seoul National University's Institute for Peace and Unification Studies and Director Kim Bum-soo, to whom I'll turn it over in a second. But thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope that you will stay connected with GWIKS. We have many more exciting events throughout the semester, and hopefully you will join us for those as well. So let me turn it over now to Director Kim Bum-soo.
So yes, let me have a welcome remark. Good morning for American participants and good evening for Korean participants. On behalf of the Institute for Peace and Unification Studies of Seoul National University, I would like to welcome all of you to join today's webinar, co-hosted by the Institute for Korean Studies at the George Washington University. As all of you already know, North Korea's illicit activity have posed significant threat not only to South Korea, but also to global security and global financial system. Today, I think our distinguished speaker will give us insight for understanding the complexity of North Korea's illicit digital operation and help us explore the countermeasure and policy to mitigate the negative impact of these operations. I think it is very timely and relevant to examine these issues and hope all of you enjoy today's webinar. Finally, I would express my sincere thanks to Director Arrington, Associate Director Yeon-ho Kim, and staffs of GW Institute for Korean Studies for coordinating and preparing all the arrangements. And great thanks to our distinguished speakers, Councillor In-sun Ho, Mr. Nick Carlson, Professor Taeun Song, and Professor Jenny Jun for their insightful and informative presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bum-soo. Let me start the panel discussion by briefly introducing the speakers. In the interest of the time, I'd like to ask the audience to refer to our event announcement for the full bio of each speaker. So the first speaker is In-sun Ho, a counselor of the Republic of Korea mission to the United Nations in New York. Before her current posting, she was a member of the panel of experts on the DPRK under the 1718 Sanctions Committee at the UN Security Council from September 2023 until April 2024. And the next speaker is Nick Carlson, a senior investigator at TRM Lab, where he specializes in complex cryptocurrency investigations. Prior to joining TRM, Nick spent 12 years as an intelligence analyst at the FBI. Our third speaker is Jenny Chun, an assistant professor in the Samnon School of International Affairs at Georgia Institute of Technology. She was previously a research fellow on the Cyber AI project at Georgetown University's Center for Security and Emerging Technology. Welcome to GW, Jenny. Last but not least, we have Taeun Song, an assistant professor of the Department of International Security and Unification Studies at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy, affiliated with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs there. Professor Song currently serves as an advisory committee member for both ROC Cyber Operations Command and the Defense Counterintelligence Command. Let me check if Insun is...
Actually, Insun tried to get in, but seems there's some technical problem in the Korean mission to the United Nations. He tried to join in. So I'm not sure, but if possible, maybe I think it would be better if Mr. Carlson have a first presentation.
All right, sounds good.
Is that okay, you know?
Sure. I mean, I can, feel that this is about cyber thing, the things that we're discussing. So, Nick, let me start with you. I'd like to ask you to explain more about North Korea's cryptocurrency heist. You must have been very busy investigating a lot of cases, right?
Yeah, no, it never slows down with North Korean crypto thefts. I think our best estimate is they are actually perpetrating probably 1/3 to 1/2 of all major cryptocurrency thefts that happen every year. So they're basically a crypto hacking superpower. Okay, I'll go ahead and start my presentation. I do apologize. I think Ha Sun, her presentation would have given a really good context to lead into mine, talking about crypto thefts generally, or North Korean cyber operations generally. But we'll go ahead and dive straight into the crypto part of this. Number one, I think brief overview here of what we'll talk about. I know that blockchain technology is extremely convoluted and obscure to most people, so I'll try to avoid the jargon when I talk about it. And then we can talk about who North Korea targets, how they launder the funds they steal, how they actually turn those into usable money for the regime, and then kind of talk about what can be done to better mitigate this problem. So for background, a company like mine, we're a blockchain intelligence firm. And so basically, to think of this in a simple sense, we have access to the transactional data that used to be hidden behind bank secrecy, because blockchains, for the most part, are open and transparent. So we're able to analyze those blockchains to provide intelligence insights to customers, which include private companies and governments. For North Korea, the overall threat, at least $2.6 billion has been stolen through 2023. And 2024 is a banner year for them. They've already stolen several $100 million and are laundering it as we speak. So this issue, it's clearly not being mitigated. North Korea continues to steal more and more every year. And this has become probably a key source of revenue for the regime. Overall trade volumes for North Korea, even in prior years when good statistics were available, were $2 to $3 billion a year. We're looking at net profits of hundreds of millions of dollars from this alone, which probably counterbalances a lot of the losses North Korea has suffered from traditional trade sanctions. They target a lot of different types of people. This is not strictly oriented against Western targets. They steal from anybody that they can, from Chinese affiliated entities. Last year, they hacked hundreds of millions of dollars from 2 exchanges that are owned by a Chinese national. And they've stolen from South Koreans. They've stolen from basically every available victim around the world. They do a lot of really complicated things to make it relatively difficult to disrupt what they're doing, including using mixers, which has seen a really powerful response from the US and South Korea with sanctions and legal actions against those mixers. But there's always a new technology available to them. And I think really key thing to talk about is that they depend on Chinese brokers to actually cash this money out. So when they steal the crypto, it's difficult to use cryptocurrency to do real things in the world at this point. And so there is this enormous underground economy that is dominated by Chinese organized crime that North Korea uses to actually turn those stolen monies into usable currency that they can use to purchase all the goods and services that they need. I think right now, the industry and government are focused on trying to claw back stolen funds. There's not much that can be done to prevent this because the attack surface is so large. But there are more aggressive actions that can be done to try to offset this and properly incentivize North Korea to stop doing what it's doing. But the overall thrust of, I think, of what we should talk about and say here is that what North Korea is doing is totally unprecedented. North Korea, you have cyber criminals in countries like Russia where they're tolerated and allowed to continue to do what they do. You have Chinese that often cooperate with the state in targeting Western companies' technologies. North Korea is unique in that these criminals are the state, right? These are serving agents and officers of government agencies in North Korea, like the Reconnaissance General Bureau. So this is truly unique in the world. There is nobody else that does this at this scale. And it's most analogous to piracy. North Korea is a modern pirate state. They are out there raiding commerce on the new digital oceans and getting away with it. Another key point is that crypto for North Korea is not just about the thefts and hacks that they perpetrate. They also use it to fund their intelligence operations. There have been cases, South Korea a couple of years ago, an army officer was arrested after having been paid in Bitcoin by North Korean operatives. It also fuels the cyber intelligence collection operations that North Korea is operating. So in addition to its thefts, North Korea is also out there targeting lots of individuals, including academics, like the folks on this panel, to try to collect information that's useful to the regime. And they use cryptocurrency to buy the VPNs and the servers that they need to actually carry out those hacks. And then finally, it facilitates this enormous network of IT development work that North Korea is involved in, where this is semi-illicit, right? They're not necessarily criminals, but they are prohibited by sanctions from working with many of these companies, and they use lots of intermediaries. There have been 2 recent FBI cases against individuals in the United States who were facilitating this for North Korean web developers. And they also use these projects that they work on as victims. We just saw a case a couple of weeks ago where about $1.6 million was stolen from a crypto project that had unwittingly hired North Korean developers to work on it. So crypto has become this kind of pervasive issue in terms of North Korea and its regime and how it functions and funds itself. There has been this, powerful response from the United States and other allies to try to disrupt the services that facilitate this. And basically, the most unfortunate thing that can happen to a mixer is to become the new favorite of the North Koreans. Basically, every time they switch favorite services, that service will get sanctioned by OFAC relatively quickly. But so far, these actions, they haven't been enough to truly disrupt what North Korea is doing. There are too many services and opportunities available in the crypto ecosystem to escape interdiction efforts. I think we can kind of brush through this, but essentially a key point is North Korea targets anybody and everybody. They really don't care who you are or where you are or what you are, so long as you have money available to them to steal. So prior to 2018, this was mostly against traditional financial institutions, banks. I mean, the Bank of Bangladesh is the most prominent example of that, where they nearly stole $1 billion from one of the poorest countries on earth. So much for their humanitarian interests. But after 2018, I think crypto has become too lucrative and too easy a target for them. And so they go after anybody and everybody. How they actually do it is pretty impressive. There are gradations in what North Korea does. So there are very sophisticated operations that they sometimes engage in, where they research the target, the individual, and do pretty incredible things, like in this New Yorker story. You can read about this. They hired actors to pose as employees of a Chilean bank to interview a prospective applicant, making him think that they were another competitor bank. Pretty incredible stuff. But for the most part, they pray and spray. They're sending out spearfish messages all the time to lots of different targets, and they just hope that somebody is unfortunate enough to click on these links. Their favorite method, right, is the job offer. So they may, look up people who look at a crypto exchange, pose as a competitor and then offer them extraordinary salaries, something that nobody would want to ignore the potential of getting a job paying that much. And that's how they get people to open the documents, the application files and stuff to penetrate their computers and steal their private keys. I think a natural question a lot of people have is, how do you know this is North Korea? And there's a bunch of kind of secrets, methods that we have that we can't disclose to the public to figure this out. But there are a few things, and number one being that they have a pretty distinctive chain or on-chain signature. The way that they do things on the blockchain, there's lots of arbitrary choices that can be made in blockchain technology, and they have a very distinct pattern that is quite different from almost anybody else. And it's best analogized to recognizing an artist. If you see a painting and you are an art expert, you can often tell who painted it just by looking at it, right? Seeing how it was painted. There are also overlaps, where addresses are reused unintentionally by the North Koreans. And this is totally understandable because they are moving, hundreds of millions of dollars through tens of thousands of cryptocurrency addresses. And they often forget that they say they have used one address before. And so we're able to kind of overlap these activities because of those interconnections. And the other thing that's really unique about North Korea, right, given what we talked about, that they are perpetrating, a third to half of all crypto hacks, is that they are a factory. They are doing this. They are the Henry Fords of crypto theft. They have turned this into an assembly line. So very few other people would behave like that, especially, most criminals, right? They're individuals, they're stealing money. They want to get away with it and they want to be rich. And that's not North Korea's motivation. They're playing a different game from basically anybody else in the world. So what North Korea is doing, right, is they're just trying to buy enough time to trade cryptocurrency and trade the risk to other people, and then use that as traditional currency. Whereas a normal, crypto thief, say, living in the United States, he's trying to maintain anonymity forever. North Korea doesn't care about that. So it makes them much easier to track than most other crypto hackers. And then finally, and this is kind of beyond my own realm of expertise, we can look at forensic analysis of the malware that was actually used to perpetrate the hacks to figure out if it was North Korea. I don't know what happened there. Okay. So key thing, North Korea already had this extensive infrastructure that it used to launder its normal economic proceeds prior to the sanctions of 2016 and 17. They have bank representatives that work for entities like Kwangsan Bank and the Foreign Trade Bank, who are present in foreign countries, and they develop relationships with friendly local nationals to facilitate opening bank accounts and conducting transactions through shell companies. So in the old days, the revenues that fed this network were coming from things like the sale of anthracite coal or counterfeit cigarettes or probably narcotics. And that has changed, right? Ever since UN international sanctions got much more strict, it's been much more difficult for North Korea to make money this way. But they continue to use this existing foreign obfuscatory network to move the money that they've stolen from crypto thefts. And so in 2023, there was an investigation. The FBI indicted several people, including Shim Hyun-sup, a representative of the Foreign Trade Bank who had been based in Dubai and by then was in China. So Shim was a representative of one of these banks, and he was at the end, the use point of stolen crypto. So after the North Koreans had stolen cryptocurrency, they would launder it and sell it to Chinese brokers who would then provide bank transfers that were then used by North Korean bankers to go out and purchase everything that North Korea needed. So that pattern, right, holds true. That is still the case today. And there are these highly professional organizations that in government, you'll hear this term CMLL, Chinese money laundering organizations. These are operated by Chinese organized crime, commonly called triads. And the North Koreans have a long and deep relationship with triad organizations. The United Kingdom's RUSI has done some excellent research on this, showing the connections between North Korea and the triads, including the 14K and Shui Feng. And these are the folks that are involved in the petroleum laundering efforts, right? Where North Korea is importing petroleum from brokers in Southeast Asia and China. Those are the same people that operate these enormous underground banking networks that Chinese, including non-criminal Chinese, use to get money out of China. And so it's really important to understand that the underground banking system that the Chinese organized criminals are operating, it's necessary if you are a wealthy Chinese to use that to get your money out of China because the banking restrictions are imposed on Chinese. And so they have created, basically through their regulation, through these attempts to limit foreign transmittal of money from China, the Chinese government has encouraged the creation of this enormous, probably $1 trillion underground banking economy that supports everybody. Every kind of criminal in the world is now using Chinese money launderers. The DEA has recently publicized a couple of investigations in California where Chinese money laundering groups are the key intermediaries that Mexican cartels now use to get the proceeds of their crimes out of the United States and back into Mexico, and to pay their suppliers in South America and to pay their suppliers in China. So the North Koreans are tapping into the same network. All this crypto that they're stealing, they're converting it into a stable coin called USDT, and they sell it to these Chinese brokers who are affiliated with these organized criminal groups. And then that money is used to facilitate all kinds of other criminal activity all around the world. So the big problem here, right, is there are too many victims available to North Korea. They are all across the world. Often they're small projects that aren't traditional companies with traditional cybersecurity practices. They're relatively easy to attack. So a lot of what governments and industry have done up to this point is try to encourage people to learn good operational security and avoid being compromised to begin with. But that is basically, trying to hold back the ocean with your hand. That is not working. You can program lots of things into cryptocurrencies to try to make it more difficult for large thefts to happen. Things like reversible transfers and time-delayed transfers, where things can't actually move without permission for a period of time. But those are all kind of potential technological solutions that are years away. My suspicion, right, is that to break this this process, the Chinese money laundering organizations themselves need to be targeted. And these are valid cases for investigators all around the world. And basically all the criminal organizations that are using crypto at this point to aid their criminal activity are using Chinese money laundering groups. There should be a concerted effort by the United States, South Korea, and allies to go after these groups and make it much more difficult for them to do what they do. And by doing that, you can choke off the vast pool of money that North Korea is able to hide in when it takes these thefts and moves them. The other thing, right, is what the government is doing now. The FBI, the National Intelligence Service in South Korea, the National Police in Korea, they are attempting to claw back money once it is stolen. So, when crypto is stolen, there are often opportunities to interdict it. But those efforts, they have been quite successful. Tens of millions of dollars have been recovered. But when weighed against the billions of dollars that have been stolen, it's clearly still worth North Korea's time to do this. And so, the ultimate solution to this, I think the US and allies have to make it more expensive for North Korea than what they earn from this. And the only way to do that is to target the North Koreans themselves, to hack North Korean representatives, to hack the bank representatives, to hack their trade representatives, and take back money from them to offset the money being lost from innocent Western and foreign victims. So there needs to be a much more concerted effort to actually disrupt and target the North Koreans in the same way that they are attacking and targeting us. And that is not happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I just want to make sure, first of all, thank you very much for your great presentation on North Korea's cryptocurrency. Just want to make sure you didn't reveal any secret investigation skills today.
No, we're very cautious. We keep our secrets close to the chest.
All right, thank you. Now, Insun is back. So let me ask Insun to share what you observed while you were deeply involved in, this a business of sanctions on North Korea, if you will.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to speak here today. So I am going to present an overview of North Korea's illicit cyber activities. These analyses are mostly based on the previous reports of the panel of experts on DPRK, established pursuant to UN Security Council resolution, where I belonged until April this year. North Korea is probably among the most cited countries in cyber heists in the world. And why and how has North Korea been carrying out illicit cyber activities over a decade? Their main goals are to obtain information of value to the North Korean regime and to illicitly generate revenue for the country that Nick just elaborated. So their organization, their cyber actors organization is North Korea's cyber threat actors are mostly subordinate to UN-sanctioned Reconnaissance General Bureau, RGB, including the Lazarus Group, Kimsuki, Andariel, and Belunarov. Several cyber threat groups under RGB increasingly collaborate and share infrastructure to conduct joint operations. And there are some recent trends of North Korea's cyber activities. There are many, but to name a few, first, there have been persistent and increasing cyber attacks on defense industry and infrastructure to steal sensitive technologies. North Korea's cyber threat actors have continued to attack defense sector companies across the globe. They obtain intellectual property or other information such as designs and blueprints that can be used to advance North Korea's WMD and ballistic missile programs and be sold to further generate revenues for its weapons programs. For example, there are many reported cases. The recent ones are where the Lazarus Group compromised aerospace companies in Spain and obtained initial access to the company's network in 2022 through a spear phishing campaign. So like Nick just mentioned, they post as recruiters on LinkedIn. So a lot of people use LinkedIn to seek jobs, and then they actually hire a lot of hiring happening on LinkedIn as well. And then they convince the target to execute malware. They disguise themselves as a recruiter, and then they propose this test as a part of hiring process. And the Lazarus Group reported, and then they got the access to the company, and then they were able to install malware to steal the sensitive information. And then in other cases, the Lazarus Group attacked aerospace companies in the Netherlands and the defense company in Poland through similar methods. And interestingly, the Lazarus Group also compromised the email server and internal network of the Russian Rocket Design Bureau, MPOMASH, in 2022. And they also attempted to attack shipbuilders in South Korea in 2023 to steal information that could be used to strengthen North Korea's naval military power, a campaign driven by Kim Jong-un's order to build medium to large military ships. And they have been carrying on this cyber espionage for a decade. So in 2016, North Korea's cyber threat actors hacked a South Korea's major shipbuilding company and stole sensitive information on warships and submarines, including cold launch technology. This technology could be used for North Korea's submarine launched ballistic missile program, and like UN. So this can constitute evasion of the arms embargo, given that such technological information could directly contribute to development of the operational capabilities of the North Korea's armed forces. And as a joint effort among the states to address these kind of operations, recently the governments of South Korea and Germany issued a joint cybersecurity advisory early 2024 to raise awareness of cyber campaigns highly likely carried out by North Korea's cyber actors against the defense sector, warning that North Korea focuses on the theft of advanced defense technologies to modernize and improve new strategic weapon systems, including reconnaissance satellites and submarines. And secondly, they have been they have been operating these cyber threat attacks to illicitly generate revenues. And partly, we believe that partly because this is one of the least regulated area, so that like Nick just mentioned, that it is very kind of profitable under the least regulation. So reportedly, North Korea's malicious cyber activities generate approximately 50% of its foreign currency income. This is an information from a member state, and are used to fund its weapons programs. And 40% of North Korea's WMD programs are funded by illicit cyber means. So the panel investigated 17 heists in 2023, for which North Korea may be responsible. It was valued at more than $750 million. Then there were also, between 2017 and 2023, there were also 58 suspected cyber attacks by DPR, by North Korea, which was investigated by the panel on cryptocurrency-related companies. It was valued at approximately $3 billion. So one cyber company called North Korea as the world's most prolific cyber thief. And interestingly, if the victim responded immediately and boldly, North Korea's operations also decreased accordingly. So one cryptocurrency service reported the seizure of approximately $5.8 million worth of North Korea-linked cryptocurrency transfers in late 2023, and then North Korea-related activity on that platform decreased significantly. So they kind of immediately react to how the victim responded to their attacks. And then there are also ransomware attacks. South Korea and the US issued an advisory last year regarding a global ransomware campaign by North Korea against the healthcare and critical infrastructure targets. According to the advisory, North Korea has been using revenue from ransomware attacks to fund other malicious cyber operations and the country's priorities and goals, including cyber operations targeting the US and South Korean governments and defense industrial base network. The two countries highly discourage ransoms because doing so does not guarantee files and records will be recovered and may pose sanction risks. And the largest group, interestingly, collaborated with a South Korean company to distribute ransomware and collected approximately $2.6 million in recovery costs from more than 700 victims. Some proceeds were reported transferred to a cryptocurrency wallet owned by the largest group. So that is how the South Korean law enforcement found out it was linked to the largest group. And the other trend in North Korea's cyber operations. So just in the previous briefing, they target just any company, any individuals, any country. So they also target neighboring countries like China and Russia, apart from South Korea and then US or Western countries. So North Korea cyber actors have also targeted government agencies, companies, and individuals in China and Russia. So in the first half of 2023, largest group ranked the 7th in attacks targeting China, in particular on government and financial sectors. And Kim Suk-hee ranked 9th in attacks targeting China, focusing on the government, media, education, and financial sector. The largest group is reported to be very active in Russia and to have access to a number of Russian systems. And lastly, I will briefly touch upon North Korea's information technology workers. Reportedly, North Korean IT workers continue to operate overseas, generating substantial income for the country. They can earn $15,000 to $60,000 monthly, but are allowed to keep only a small percentage of their earnings, according to former IT workers. Presumably, there are 3,000 North Korean IT workers overseas and 1,000 in North Korea, primarily located in Naseong, Pyongyang, and Siniju, the border area with China, because of the connection, we presume. And North Korea IT workers seek unauthorized employment with organizations around the world to generate revenue and engage in espionage. They also use local facilitators to consolidate their earnings into bank accounts under the facilitators' names. And then the money is used to purchase items requested by the regime, like, for example, refined petroleum and computers, and they are sent to the North Korean. So thank you. This ends my presentation.
Thank you, In-sun. I think we can discuss a little bit more about how to deal with North Korea's illicit cyber activities, even without the panel of experts. We can expect alternatives will be emerging, but meanwhile, what should we do? That I think we can discuss a little bit more later on. Let me move on to our second topic. So it is a changing cybersecurity policy and U.S.-ROC cooperation. So Jenny, are we adapting our cybersecurity policies fast enough to counteract North Korea's digital tactics?
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me this morning. And it's great to be on this panel with such a great group of speakers. Also, big thanks to Yeonho and all of the co-hosts for pulling all of this together, this great panel. So as Yeonho said, I was asked to talk about the changing cybersecurity policy landscape in the US and South Korea in response to the North Korean cyber threat. So I'll just kind of start there. So starting from the US side, the US, takes North Korea's cyber threat very seriously. So the number one focus, as Nick mentioned, is the cryptocurrency theft, since the US government estimates that about half of North Korea's missile program is funded through this, and is obviously a really big gaping hole in the current sanctions regime. But this doesn't mean that they overlook other stuff like industrial espionage by Andariel, et cetera, et cetera. And so over the past few years, the US has been ramping up efforts to use a variety of means at their disposal to put a damper in the illicit money flow to the North Korean regime, and also to respond to their espionage activities. And some of this, In-sun and Nick has already talked about it a little bit. So on the crypto theft front, the main approach has been to basically intervene in the intermediary steps after the moment the funds are stolen, and up to the point where it ends up in North Korean controlled accounts. And so this is mainly being done through the Justice Department and the FBI. And this includes various indictments of hackers and money laundering intermediaries, some of which have led to actual arrests and sentences. They were able to directly seize parts of the stolen funds in cooperation with the private sector and foreign governments. For example, they were able to seize about $30 million out of the $600 million stolen in the Axie Infinity heist 2 years ago. They've also sanctioned crypto mixers that facilitate this money laundering process, such as Tornado Cash and Sinbad.io. And they've also followed up with this sanctions by indicting the founders of Tornado Cash for money laundering and sanctions violations. More recently, attention is also being paid to the problem of illicit IT workers, as Nick and In-sun have mentioned, ransomware, and also espionage activities. So this includes the indictment of North Korean hacker Rim Jong-hyuk at the end of July last month for industrial espionage and ransomware activities, as well as the arrest of US persons for facilitating North Koreans to get jobs at US companies. Finally, also the US government is watching North Korean efforts to gather strategic intelligence from the so-called Korea Watcher community, which is all of us here, and have issued joint advisories to raise awareness and gather information about individual cases that's affecting many of us here gathered today in this Zoom call. And so some of these are done in cooperation with South Korea, which I believe Taeun will be able to cover more in detail. And so all of this is to say that the US government is on this issue and is using existing authorities and networks to throw curveballs at North Korea. And yes, of course there are limitations, and it's always going to be a cat and mouse game. And so far, North Korea seems to be doing quite well in this cat and mouse game. So the limitations are, things like, Tornado Cash. So mixers like Tornado Cash is basically a decentralized protocol, and that means that there are limits to how effectively the U.S. government can really enforce sanctions apart from arresting its founders. And so, we saw that immediately after the sanctions were announced, activity on that mixer has dropped quite a bit in 2003, but we've now seen a resurgence of activity in 2024. And there's, limited tools for really controlling that effectively from the U.S. government's perspective. There are also a lot of alternative mixers and laundering schemes available. If there are mixers that are not available, you can do hash rentals. So you can walk in with one type of cryptocurrency, buy a bunch of computing resources, and then use that to, launder your crypto to another form of crypto that is not linked in any way. And so you can launder money that way. And so there are all these alternative means available. And so the US can only do so much in order to play catch up in designating these mixers as sanctioned on the SDN list. North Koreans are also sending stolen funds through places like the Russia-based Garantex crypto exchange. And that exchange has already been sanctioned for various other reasons, including ransomware and things like that. But North Koreans are still able to use that exchange to wire their stolen crypto, such as in the Atomic Wallet heist. So direct seizures recover some of the money, but it's still only a fraction of the total money. And so there are all these problems and limitations, and the U.S. government recognizes all of these, but the main goal is to cause friction as much as possible and to raise premiums on these intermediary steps that are a necessary component in the North Korean scheme. And the goal is to ultimately reduce the amount of money that ends up in the regime's pockets, apart from the moment of heist. And as Nick mentioned, there are a couple more things we can do on that front, especially some of the technical measures that we may be able to impose on crypto exchanges and DeFi platforms as they are folded into more of the traditional sort of security exchanges and under those kinds of regulations to kind of increase this friction. But there are limitations as to what we can do on both ends, right? So we cannot necessarily prevent these hacks from, happening altogether, especially that North Korea is targeting really globally. And so there are limitations as to what the US government can do, and its reach is limited on that front. If they're going after firms in Asia and Europe and Africa, there are limitations. And there are also limitations on the other front in terms of, having direct effects on a lot of entities that are controlled under the Chinese government, and there are limitations as to, what we can do there. So, practically what we can do is to tackle the intermediary steps, and fortunately, the U.S. government is paying a close attention to this issue. On the South Korean side, there was as some of you may already know, a drastic change in its cybersecurity policy after the Yoon administration came into power. So most importantly, there has been a lot of progress in cyber cooperation between the US and South Korea, and an expansion of that scheme into the US, South Korea, Japan trilateral exchanges, and also expansion into multilateral efforts in cooperation with NATO, and other partnerships. And there are almost, too many meetings to keep track of on this front. There has been, dozens of this happening over just the past 2.5 years. And I believe Ken will cover some of this in our presentation as well. So I'll spare you the details. So instead, I'll focus on South Korea's new 2024 national cybersecurity strategy and what this really means for cooperation between the two countries. So the 2024 strategy from the Yoon administration is a big pivot from the 2019 strategy from the Moon administration. So it covers a lot more ground and focuses on the North Korean threat primarily, as opposed to a focus on passive defense at home. And there are, a bunch of different updates in this document is, pretty comprehensive. But for the purposes of today, I want to focus on their pivot to a more offensive posture, and that's sort of the key word in their strategy. And the key phrase that appears in the strategy is the term offensive cyber defense, which appears 11 times in the document. And I promise you, I'm not making this up. This is taken word for word from their actual strategy. And so, the South Korean government will need to work through a couple of issues in both, deepening the conceptualization of what offensive cyber defense actually means and how this is operationalized in action. And so, on the surface, this new strategy looks like a pivot towards the current U.S. posture of defend forward, because it seems to start from the same realization that, passive defense at home is really not enough to stop cyber attacks or intrusions. But on a closer look, this concept is actually not in synchronization with the U.S. strategy. So the South Korean strategy looks a lot like it's focused on acquiring offensive capabilities as a response to cyber attacks. So the goal here is to achieve deterrence by punishment through attribution and retaliation. And that's why so much of the rest of the strategy is focused on A, acquiring attribution capabilities, and B, assessing the severity of cyber incidents, presumably so that they can assess what a proportional response looks like in cyberspace. But this kind of thinking is exactly what the US has moved away from back in 2018 with the strategic approach of persistent engagement and the strategy of defend forward. The very motivation for this major pivot from the US side was the realization that deterrence in cyberspace is really hard to achieve, especially at the threshold below that of armed conflict, which are the kinds of attacks that we experience every day, these large doomsday scenarios, which rarely happens in cyberspace. And to give you an analogy, so the US strategy is to try to knock the knife out of the attacker's hand before they slash you, versus we want to acquire a knife ourselves so that we can slash them back so that they don't think about attacking us back again. And so you can immediately kind of see that these two different kinds of approaches, mean that, the kinds of capabilities one needs to acquire differs a lot. What kinds of intelligence and information is needed differs a lot. And what kinds of processes are needed at the operational and tactical level differs a lot. And so this is something that South Korea needs to work through as its strategy matures and develops beyond the 2024 strategy. The other problem that comes with this new posture is the signaling effect and the potential for misperception arising from a public posture like this. So not just vis-a-vis North Korea, but vis-a-vis other cyber actors who occasionally also target South Korea, such as China and Russia. And so once you say you're going to get a knife, others are going to be worried that it can point in multiple directions, even though the intention from the South Korean side is primarily focused on the North Korean threat. And so we also have yet to see concrete sort of realization of how this offensive cyber defense is going to work within the bureaucratic structure of the South Korean government. So, is this going to be tasked under intelligence, under the military? Is it going to, work in conjunction? Who is tasked with acquiring these offensive capabilities and all that? So we'll have to wait and see, what this actually looks like in action, and like our eyes are sort of attuned to that. And this disconnect may, possibly pose some issues in the US-ROK alliance cooperation in this space. Unless South Korea is de facto pursuing something that looks actually like defend forward when it comes to cooperation with the US. So I'd be really interested to hear what Kevin has to say about the military cooperation bit. And also sort of in conclusion, kind of looking ahead into the future, we may also need to take a step back and think about why North Korea does all of this. And so for the most part, North Korea's cyber operations are basically a means to another end, right? So obviously it is to fund their nuclear missile program, but it is also to fund personal wealth and elite buy-in from for regime security. Also, it is to obtain technical information for R&D on whatever is deemed a national priority by the elite. And that can include weapons development, but also like COVID vaccine research during the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, the goal is to obtain strategic insight into US policy towards the Korean Peninsula. And so all of this is to say that observing what North Korea targets can be informative of what their strategic priorities are, and vice versa. Knowing what their priorities are can inform in turn what they will try to go after in a couple of years. And so, as Insan mentioned, Andariel has been going after, a wide range of companies that, aid North Korea's weapons system. And this ranges anything from uranium enrichment, shipbuilding, UAVs, radars, robots, 3D printing, and the list goes on. And so focusing on really finding out what kind of research they want to do may be sort of predictive of what kinds of companies and industries that they will go after. And so, for example, analyzing their science and tech academic journals shows a big recent focus on AI and machine learning, and a general focus on digitization/digital economy from the state media outlets since 2019. So thinking about stuff like this can allow the US to stay a bit ahead of the curve rather than kind of responding to a campaign that already started and playing catch up. So I'll end my remarks here and look forward to the rest of the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Hopefully, we'll get very reliable system of forecasting North Korea's strategic priority by monitoring and investigating their cyber illicit activities. And I also agree. And Jenny, your presentation reminded me of the fact that many North Korea watchers, including those in Washington, they're very much alerted to and warned of phishing emails, presumably from North Korean hackers. So last but not least, Taeun is our next speaker. And let me ask Taeun to elaborate on U.S.-ROK military cooperation in cyber security. And Taeun, I'd like to ask you, what the strategies are being implemented to enhance U.S.-ROK cooperation in the face of the lot of challenges we discussed today.
Okay. You see my presentation?
Yeah. Can you make it a full screen?
Right. Slide show. Let me. Okay. Thank you for inviting me to this important seminar. I'll get you updated for the recent changes in South Korean cybersecurity policy. And in the end of my presentation, I will also discuss several policy agendas that our government needs to consider in order to realize our proclaimed policy goals in national cybersecurity strategy. I'm gonna skip several slides that already Jenny covered. In February this year, Korean government released a new national cybersecurity strategy. This new strategy is really important because it outlines South Korea's goals of becoming a global pivotal state with more leadership role in cybersecurity area by emphasizing our role as a liberal democracy, supporting the values of freedom, human rights, and rule-based order in cyberspace. Among all our goals and strategy, the word, as Jenny mentioned, the word offensive defense stands out in a new strategy. I got a lot of questions from U.S. Embassy here and Australian Embassy here. because our past cybersecurity policy had been very defensive oriented and passive one without this means we didn't really take countermeasures or retaliate DPRK's cyber attacks, although we are the main target of the most of the cyber attacks by North Korea. Don't we have offensive capability? No. Our national cyber capabilities, including offensive power, are evaluated very highly according to many international index measured by various institutions. So why does our new strategy emphasize offensive defense? Because defensive capabilities are insufficient for countering cyber espionage and disinformation campaign and cyber attacks, including crypto heist. Our agencies are now taking more preemptive and offensive stance for anticipated attacks while not neglecting to protect citizens' privacy in performing more active duties by sticking with the lawful means. However, despite our proclaimed policy goals, South Korea needs legal framework domestically to achieve our proclaimed goals. In general, as you might know, active defense means hackback. However, ROK's offensive defense is not hackback. It is not like a U.S. hunt for South Korea has actually, this is a little bit sad, but we have no legal support and institutional framework for hackback operations. This means our offensive capabilities are not used fully and actually wasted, and actually only it can be operated in ROK US alliance exercise under hypothetical scenario. So I think the ROK's joint hunt for operation with the US is essential and necessary in near future. For South Korea, DPRK's cyber threat is not only one variable to turn our passive cybersecurity policy to an active one. One of the important events that dramatically changed ROK's cybersecurity policy is ROK US Summit in April 2023. In this summit, we adopted, this is a really important document, a strategic cybersecurity cooperation framework. Based on this framework, we have accomplished so many mutually promised initiatives for cybersecurity cooperation. So following this move, ROK US-Japan Trilateral Summit in last summer led to the information sharing on DPRK's missile launch and cyber threats, as well as our efforts in countering state-sponsored disinformation campaign in cyber space. And then this was really based on our ROK's improved relationship with Japan under our current EU government. Since then, ROK's cyber operations command for the first time. You know, it is so strange. We are allies, but this is our first time to participate in the US-led multinational cyber exercise, Cyber Flag, and we participated again last year. And most important event this year was ROK US Cyber Alliance exercise in January 2024. This is our first joint cybersecurity drill in Seoul. It was successfully completed, and US Cyber Command actually, they stayed together with us in Seoul for a month. So based on this successful exercise, only next year, we're going to have a second exercise in Maryland in the US. And also we had a Freedom Edge exercise this summer. This is a trilateral multi-domain military exercise that ROK US Japan participated. Actually, this is really a big progress, we can say. Now, the change, you know, there is some important changes. The PRK attack US for entire attacking event, over 40% of attacks are targeted for US. So in 2022, we have another important event. As Jenny already mentioned, ROK joined NATO's CCDCOE as the first Asian member. And actually, since 2019, South Korea has already participated in a Locked Shield cyber defense exercise that is hosted by NATO's CCDCOE. Actually, last year, in April 2023, South Korea continued to participate in Locked Shield, and China expressed its discontent about our participation. Why is China angry? Cyber exercise is really, really important because cyber exercise with allies of shared values is a key to a continued coalition, and we have multiple European partners for cyber exercise like Netherlands and UK and Germany. So this is the progress that we made. So now I can say US and South Korea now almost we reached the fullest extent of our cyber exercise from a strategical level to the level between maybe operational and technical levels. So this is good news. And one of the big change in cybersecurity policy under the current EU government, we began to raise our voice with our other like-minded countries in criticizing DPRK's malicious behavior by issuing joint cybersecurity advisory on DPRK's malicious activities. And I'd like to emphasize this slide. Despite all of the cyber threats by DPRK, actually its defense capability is not strong because cyber defense needs very advanced and expensive technologies, and only 1% of North Korean population have access to worldwide internet. So they don't actually have such kind of incentive to put their money for the cyber defense. So according to the most of cyber power index measured by major research institutions, of course, South Korea is much more stronger than North Korea in terms of defense, maybe not for offense. So also you may find some news report an American individual hacked North Korea to the extent that North Korea's entire national internet shut down. This shows their vulnerability for cyber defense. In 2016, North Korea failed its missile launch 7 times out of 8 times, and it is actually reported that such failures were the result of a U.S. offensive cyber operation, the DDoS attack, or we can say left of launch. I'm not sure whether this was really the result of U.S. cyber operations, but it is highly likely the case when we look at the case of 2022. The year 2022 was the year that the PRK launched the missiles 37 times. However, whenever they did, its nationwide internet shut down because of U.S. DDoS attacks. Whenever it tested the missile launch, it experienced a nationwide internet outage. So so what did North Korea do after this surprise of 2016? In 2017, North Korea began to use new internet service from Russia in order to improve its cyber resilience. Before this year, in 2017, it has only used Chinese internet service. Okay, so as I mentioned in the previous government, South Korea has long sustained very passive and defense-oriented cyber security policies. This means we took no offensive action against North Korean cyber attacks in the past. This is why ROK's cyber power ranks seventh, as estimated by the very first center as Harvard University. Actually, this is lower than other indexes measured by, for example, MIT Technology Review, because Belfer Center also assesses the intent of using offensive capability as a weighted score. This means South Korea has offensive cyber power, but has not used it. So as you look at this slide, according to MIT Technology Review for cyber defense capability, in 2022-2023, South Korea ranked a little bit higher, third. And so depending on the way of a measure, the ranking can be varied. So anyway, the reasons for ROK's increased cyber security cooperation with US and other like-minded countries is high cyber technology. So this is my last slide. Well, high quality cyber technology is not enough in countering external cyber threats. And South Korea has a lot of homework to work on. First, we need new cyber operations doctrine for military side that effectively serves our proclaimed offensive defense that enables us to conduct hack back or hunt for operation with the US. We need to blur the clear-cut distinction between peacetime and wartime cyber operations. Cyber crisis begins in peacetime, and we need to get prepared for this. And South Korea needs trustful private sectors, as we see all of the cyber operations done by Meta, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft in Russia-Ukraine war. And like the US, outsourcing government's burden of countering foreign influence operations, or so disinformation campaign, to private sectors is necessary, as Meta or Google did. Also, between private sectors of the US and South Korea, I think it's now the time for private sectors to cooperate like two governments did. Also, we need effective strategic communication between the US and South Korea. And lastly, I hope sometime we can make some more progress for joint hunt for operation in the Indo-Pacific region beyond North Korea. This is all, and thank you for listening my presentation.
Thank you, Taeun, sorry. It's good to know that North Korea is actually weak on their cyber defense.
Right, yes. When they get attacked, nationwide, internet service is shut down, entirely.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can move on from there in terms of getting a better idea of how to deal with this whole cyber issue. I'd like to remind the audience that we are taking questions from you, and the Q&A box is already open. So when you type in your questions, please make sure to identify your name and affiliation. And before I open it up for Q&A, let me ask the speakers if you have any comments to make on the other presenters' remarks. No, they're all good to go. You accept everything they said? All right. Let me take a question from, let me see. Because when I listened to Nick and Insun's presentations, the fact that North Korea, they are utilizing their Chinese brokers to cash out. And also North Korea, they are actually targeting Chinese and Russian entities. So that sounds really interesting to me. And I was wondering how the Chinese and Russian government is dealing with that situation. And I think we have a question related to my curiosity. Is from somebody anonymous. What is the attitude of Chinese government to money laundering for North Korea? Are North Korean hackers also based in China? Is money laundering for North Korea also done through Russian organized crime?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take a stab at this and open it up to everybody else. But I think it's complicated, right? The Chinese government's position on this. First, the Chinese government is incredibly corrupt. So there is an enormous amount of bribery and general corruption. But there's also this kind of long-standing symbiotic relationship with Chinese organized crime. When you look in Hong Kong and you see pro-democracy protests, who is it that comes out and beats the protesters? It's not the police. It is gangsters. It is members of these triad organizations. And so there is this existing kind of stasis. And there's also this high degree of tolerance for criminality. Some of the largest companies in Hong Kong, their presidents and CEOs are known criminals. For a great example, the Bank of Bangladesh heist, the money that was actually successfully gotten into China by the North Koreans was carried by a junket operated by Sun City, which is an enormous banking or entertainment and gambling conglomerate in Macau and Hong Kong, who was led by a man who's now in prison in China, probably for not paying the right bribes. So there's this like incredible, murky environment in which these groups operate. But I think a really key thing here is that the actual, laundering of the crypto, it's conducted by Chinese, but they are expatriate. So for the most part, these are people in Cambodia, Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, and Macau. And they exist, right? And they are there to service the Chinese market. So, I mean, like the most vanilla example is if you're a wealthy Chinese businessman and you want to go to Macau to gamble, gambling is illegal in China. And if you want to get your money to Macau, you have to work through these Chinese criminal organizations. So you would stake collateral in mainland China, which is given to a Chinese criminal there. And you go to Macau and you are fronted the money that you staked in China in Macau. And so that's kind of the basic function of this. And it exists, its very purpose is to defeat Chinese government regulation, right? It is to get money out of China overseas where it can be used to do stuff too, like buying investment homes in Vancouver, Canada, right? That's a huge problem. It's a problem in the Western United States as well. So all of this undercuts, official Chinese policy, and yet it exists and it persists, which makes me think the Chinese aren't doing very much to stop it at all.
Thank you, Nick. I think you also answered the question from Jong-sung Kim. The question was, are there any ways to specifically reveal the Chinese brokers' identities? So I think you, in a way, answered his questions too. Jenny, Taeun, Insun, do you have anything to add about this China-Russia thing? Yes, Insun.
Yes. So when we request information under the name of UN to Chinese government and Russian government, the official answer was always that they fully implementing the UN sanctions. And then mostly they said that there are not enough evidence to prove there have been like DPRK heists in this area and then the stealing money, etc. So it was kind of hard to find out what was going on in detail, like as part of the investigation. But interestingly, we also sending letters to Chinese and Russian entities. But interestingly, we at a later stage we heard back from the intelligence agencies that the entities which actually got our letters, their operation significantly decreased, or they became aware of the UN sanctions. So that was the part of the efforts that we did to help countries and entities implement the UN sanctions. So it was. So I think that at the kind of the central government level, there have been some law enforcement and then enforcement to implement the UN sanctions, but at the municipal level and then the on the ground, like it's a huge network. So it's really, we think it's like Nick just mentioned that it's very likely that there have been rampant cases of evading sanctions, UN sanctions or unilateral sanctions. And one of the questions about the DPRK IT workers in China. So according to our research, there have been probably 100,000 overseas workers from DPRK. And then most of them, we believe that reside in China and Russia. And for example, according to the research, 3,000 North Korean IT workers overseas, and then most of them, we believe, work in China because China is the closest country to DPRK, and then naturally they have a lot of facilitators and over-the-counter traders to change the cryptocurrency to fiat currency. So it's a lot easier for North Korean IT workers to operate in countries like China and Russia, and then because of the traditional like friendly relations, it would be easier probably for them to get like visas, like student visas or visitor visas in other countries. So there are this environment where the North Korean workers find it like more comfortable to operate in these countries.
Thank you. Yes.
For Chinese position about the DPRK's cyber attacks against China, actually, I saw one report that China released a report about the DPRK's cyber espionage activities against China. One thing really interesting is that actually Russia is the main target, one of the big target of Chinese cyber espionage activities. And China is the main target of North Korean cyber espionage. So they are hacking each other for information, especially about defense industry. So that's it's a very natural thing for cyber space, hacking each other for cyber espionage and getting information and collecting information about each other.
Thank you. Let me take a couple of more related questions. In the interest of time, let me bundle them. So one is from Dagin Han, a Radio Free Asia reporter. So are there any emerging trends where non-North Korean hackers or organizations unrelated to North Korea are disguising themselves as North Korean entities to attribute their criminal activities to the regime? And another question I think related is, oh, it's gone. Let me see.
That might be my mistake.
Yeah, it's IPUS-GWIKS Sharma. So this question is directed to Taeun and Jenny. So do you think that with strengthening liberal ties with Russia, the number of cyber espionage and cyber attacks from DPRK will decrease, showcasing on increasing trust and likely information sharing? And what should be U.S. response to the DPRK Russia possible cyber intelligence cooperation?
I think, for the field of cyber, the issues of cyber espionage, it's actually irrelevant to cyber cooperation. They are constantly hacking each other for information on defense industry, maybe from North Korean side. especially when Russia and North Korea negotiate for arms sales. That's the time when North Korea attack Russia more frequently for getting information. It's not like DDoS attack. It's more about getting, collecting information about what kind of arms Russia has. They want to know, the real tangible facts. So cyber cooperation is not really related to any possibility of decreasing cyber espionage activity from North Korean side, I think.
Yeah, I would echo everything Ten said, that it's not really going to be tied, and I would even suspect that there would be a positive relationship between closer ties and more hacking, because you now have weapons exchanges and all of this activity going on, and maybe they want to verify or obtain more information about certain deals that are being in discussion.
Thank you. Nick, do you have anything to comment on this non-North Korean hackers?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the context of crypto thefts, it would be a really bad idea to imitate the North Koreans because, like I said, they're not very good at actually anonymizing who they are and where their money's going. So wouldn't recommend that if you're a hacker, and I don't think we've seen it. But in terms of like traditional cyber attacks, espionage, stuff like that, North Korean malware, yeah, it's out there and other people can use it. So it's definitely something I think a lot of cybersecurity firms are aware of and are very cautious about attribution regarding. Because look, it's like a marketplace, right? And people are buying and selling malware all the time. So it's really hard to definitively attribute something just because it's malware that we've previously seen North Koreans use.
Thank you. And Nick,
Just to add,
yes.
just to add, the only public case of like a definitive false flag operation is the Olympic destroyer attack for the opening ceremony of the Pyeongchang Olympics. And that was a Russian false flag operation pretending to be North Korea.
Okay, thank you. Nick, I understand you try not to use a lot of jargons, but I have this question. What is the connection between the CCP and CMLOs? Does the government support the CMLOs? Is it trying to tamp down on them?
Yeah, I mean, so this kind of goes to the prior discussion there, right? Chinese money laundering organizations and the Chinese Communist Party. I think it's this, complicated relationship. And I'm sure that local Chinese police in investigating local crime often have issues and try to enforce the law against these kinds of groups. But at a national level, it's extremely disappointing. And I would frankly pose this as a country that has the most pervasive surveillance system in the world, right? Where basically anyone's information is available to the state at all times. It strains my credulity that they are so ineffective at disrupting these kinds of groups. And it goes back to my own experience with the FBI, when we were investigating traditional North Korean bank networks, which were all functioned through China, right? All of this was occurring through China with Chinese intermediaries and Chinese banks. And we attempted to cooperate with the Chinese government. And there was ultimately litigation about this because we got zero cooperation from them, despite promises that we would receive it. So I don't know what's going on in China. I don't know why it is the way it is, but whatever they're doing is not effective if they're doing anything at all.
Thank you. I think I have another technical question here from Martin. What's the cost of the money laundering? If we see a headline saying North Korean hackers have stolen, say, $10 million, how much do they end up with after the laundering, the CMLO part? Another CMLO thing. You're muted, Nick.
Sorry. Curious for Insan and other folks' thoughts on this. But to Jenny, what she spoke about earlier, right? The global response to this, right, from the South Koreans, the United States, is to create friction. And so ultimately, in these cases, I think the good guys are lucky if they block 10 to 15% of this right at the end after the theft. And then the actual money launderers, the Chinese groups that take this money and layer it through this underground ecosystem, they are really cheap. And this goes to a larger problem, not just North Korea, right, but global money laundering generally. It used to be normal, like in narcotics cases, to see a 10 or 20% fee for a money launderer. Those fees are really much lower now, 1 to 3%, and sometimes free, depending. We use this term maker and taker. So the North Koreans in these cases, they're takers, right? They're putting crypto into the system and getting fiat out. But if you're putting fiat in, these groups don't charge you anything. It's free because that's the real product, right? Is US dollars for the most part. So it's extremely cheap and it's getting cheaper all the time. And it's a testament to the ineffectiveness of global law enforcement's, attempt to address this, that it is so cheap. It shouldn't be. It should be 10 to 20 to 30%, but it's not.
Thank you. I think the next two questions, I think we have a few minutes to answer these questions, are mostly directed to Jenny and Taeyeon, but Nick and Insan, feel free to chip in. First question is from Sujin Kim, a graduate school student at Seoul National University. I'm curious about the implications of North Korea's currently limited but potentially evolving cyber capabilities and counterfeit currency technology for the future of military cyber conflicts. And the next question is from Olivia Stars. Last year, North Korea shut down several embassies globally. How did this affect North Korea's cryptocurrency activities and money laundering techniques? And the last question I have here is from Sean Dolan, who is assistant director here. Sean, I think your question has been mostly answered. I'm not dismissing your question, but so I think well, we have two last questions. Anybody?
So I can maybe jump. Oh, go ahead, Taeyeon.
Oh, okay. Okay. The role of the embassy, abroad is intelligence, right? Is to collect information about other countries. But because North Korea shut down a lot of embassies outside, and then their intelligence capability is severely limited. So this means they're gonna increase their cyber espionage activities very rapidly. So it will be more intense for their cyber espionage activities. But I don't know whether shutting down their embassies, how it's going to affect their crypto heist activities. I cannot answer to that question.
Yeah, on the embassy question, I would maybe add that the shutting down of the embassies is not necessarily it's not a cause or it's not an input for cryptocurrency activities and money laundering activities, but it may be an effect of the fact that they're able to do so much now in the cyberspace that running an embassy is very costly in terms of operational cost, and if you're not going to generate much human out of it, nor launder a lot of money through the embassy, then maybe it is no longer needed, and maybe it's sort of a cost-cutting measure to shut down some embassies that are not generating benefit for the regime. That's just my hypothesis for why that's happening. For Sujin's question, so I think a lot of North Korea's cyber activities currently are just focused on cyber crime and espionage, and we actually don't see much of sort of these strategic attacks coming out of North Korea as much post 2015-ish. And so they've seemed to put all of their eggs in the basket of let's try to use this capability to generate money, and then we can use that money to then invest in other conventional weapons programs and the nuclear program. So that's currently North Korea's posture when it comes to cyberspace. But how South Korea and the U.S. responds to North Korea's threats may have military dimensions to it, and as I mentioned, could potentially cause, I wouldn't say it would cause a conflict necessarily, but pose certain sources of miscommunication and misperception, vis-a-vis North Korea as well, but also vis-a-vis other regional actors who are active in cyberspace. And it will be a challenge for the US and South Korea to kind of carefully navigate that, and reassure and also, recalibrate what offensive capabilities mean when they are just responding to, things like cryptocurrency theft and industrial espionage. Thanks.
Thank you. In-sun and Nick, you have the last words. Anything to add?
Yes, just jumping in about the embassy question. I agree with Jenny's assessment. Like cost-effective aspect, I presume that North Korea saw that it's not very cost-effective to have embassies in those countries. So in my briefing, according to the information that we got before, North Korea, they generate approximately 50% of its foreign currency income out of cyber activities. So cyber activities, cyber operations, as it become more profitable, I think North Korea kind of calculated like costs and then the profits out of their like cyber operations and then having embassies in other countries. So I can hardly think of any effect on cyber operations by withdrawing their embassies overseas.
Yeah, I would just coda that is there's a couple of really great indictments that the FBI has released about North Korean hacking operations, including the Sony hack and then later cyber crypto thefts. If you want to read those, they go into great detail. I mean, they're actually written in chapter form, so you can learn all about how North Korea's hackers operate in China and overseas and the non-official covers that they use. For the most part, yeah, they work for companies. They're not embassy-based.
Okay, thank you, Nick. With that, I'd like to thank all the distinguished speakers for joining us today, especially Taeun and Bumsu for staying up late at night for us. And I'd also like to thank our GWIKS team for putting this together. And of course, thank you all for joining us. With that, let me conclude today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Good night. No.